So, welcome to the very first in a new series of Divine Business Journeys. And I am Fiona Morris. I am the host of the Divine Business Circle and the Natural Healing Guide for Nourish and Flourish. And this is the first series, the first episode of 2023, which started last year. And I'm with a really gorgeous guest today who may not need any introduction to many people who follow me, but if you haven't met her before, I'm delighted to introduce you to Leonie Dawson, who is a brilliant business unicorn. And now let me just find some words that I shared about Leonie earlier today. In fact, I met so many of my business besties through you, Leonie. So I'm sure a lot of people who are tuning into this right now are familiar with you and probably met me through you indeed.
It always makes me so happy. Like, I just want to be known as the person who helps people find their besties. You know what I mean? Like, it's absolutely nothing about what I do, and yet there's been so many people now that find their best friends and their business collaborators and their soulmates through my communities. I'm so fucking grateful.
Yes. Oh, gosh, you're amazing. So grateful for you. So, just to introduce you to Leonie. So, Leonie and her vibrant community have been a huge part of encouraging me on my own divine business journey since I first joined. I think it was called Amazing Biz and Life Academy when I first joined about 11 years ago now. And I think it was just on the cusp of it being transformed from the goddess circle, goddess something wonderful.
Yeah.
So what I love about Leonie is that she's got an amazingly now 8-figure business. And you have this amazing podcast, which is called Leonie Refuses to Be Categorised, which I absolutely adore because, like Leonie, I am multi-passionate and I have been hugely inspired by how Leonie shares everything. I haven't quite got to the completely bare your soul. I'm a lot more. I'm a Pisces, so Scorpios are very private too, I know, but you're a Scorpio who wears her heart fully on her sleeve, and I love that about you. So Leonie is a Scorpio soul sister who goes to places in her business where others fear to tread and covers grief and death, dying, talks about sex, mental health, all the things, all very scorpionic subjects, which although I haven't got a lot of Scorpio, I have Pluto in my first house, so I sort of really get that wanting to share stuff that makes others freak out sometimes, but I probably have my own way of doing it. So I'm coming out of about a month of, I'm going to get a bit wobbly now because my father passed away about just over a month ago now. And I feel really grateful to have an opportunity to speak with you, Leonie, because I know that subjects of grief and death and loss are something that you often talk about in your business. And I really admire you for that. I personally have a strong connection with the subject of grief because it was the subject of my dissertation when I studied herbal medicine years ago now. But my grandmother was in the process. She'd just had a stroke, similar to my dad, and she was paralyzed and unable to speak through the course of my studies. And my family live in Indonesia. Sorry, it's all a bit raw for me right now. So, thank you. So I yeah, it's a subject that's very close to my heart, and seeing you share about it in different ways through your podcast and through your posts and so on has been really, in a way, it gives people permission to really connect with something that's universal, you know, loss and that kind of completeness of not being able to connect with people that you love, you know, whether it's I mean, for me, I live very far away from my family normally, even though in the past 2 years I've had the privilege of connecting with them, partly because I came back to Malaysia, where my parents decided to retire 2 years ago, after my dad had a stroke, to support my mum because it was during lockdown and there wasn't any, it was very difficult to get uh, you know, the support, healthcare support back then, or caregiving support. So I came out and thought it was just going to be a 3 month journey, and it's ended up being 2 years, and just went home in February after a year and a half or so, after my father passed away. And then shortly after that, my dad went to critical condition. So I'm back here. So it's been a full month off my business and off social media. And that's something else that maybe we can touch on, Leonie, because I know that you've taken a huge social media sabbatical and only very recently came back on. And I think that's something that's really nourishing, particularly when there are deep emotions, or indeed if you've thrown yourself into the business and you haven't given yourself that step back, which unfortunately, sorry, my phone is just alarmed.
That's okay.
1 second.
I love the sound.
It's actually a different sound every time, just to keep me on my toes. It's 11:11 a.m. here in Malaysia, so I set it for 11:11 because it just kind of connects me with alignment and magic, and yeah, it just happens to be an 11 o'clock start here in Malaysia for a call. And I know for you, Leonie, it's 6:30 in the morning.
No, it's 1:11 p.m.
What? Oh my god. How magical is that?
I know, usually I do
okay.
calls at 6:30. Usually I do calls at 6:30 in the morning for overseas, but we're similar time zones now, baby.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't know what time zone I'm in, so I was just going off the that reminder that I received for our call, which suggested.
Oh yeah.
So I maybe looked at the earlier time. So 11:11 at 1:11 for you. So how perfect is that?
It's beautiful.
So yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm babbling slightly, and I want to hear from you. So Leonie, yeah, thank you for being such a compassionate soul, and showing us kind of more sensitive types of business owners how to just really authentically be ourselves. I think sometimes there is this sense of you know, seeing all the shiny things out there in the world and seeing people presenting this front in the business, and even if we know it intellectually or not, that's not, doesn't feel to me anyway authentic in many cases. But in your case, I just feel like you're just fully yourself, warts and all, and you bravely share that to the world. So I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey in doing that, because I'm just imagining that it may not have always been this way, or have you just always been able to bear your soul in this way? Can you share a little bit more about your journey and how you've kind of got to where you are today?
Of course, my love. And firstly, I just want to say, I'm so sorry for the loss of your papa, and also this huge journey you've been on of caretaking, you know, caretaking your dad and walking him through the ends of his life, and then supporting your mum as well to caregive, and then to, you know, walk her through a grief. Like, you're just such a natural born healer, and just one of those just beautiful humans inside and out. And your tears bless us because they remind us that we are here for a very precious and precarious time, and any love we get, any time we get is just a fucking blessing, and the pain and the grief is interwoven with that, and none of us get out of this alive. No matter how much we manifest, no matter how much we have good intentions, it doesn't protect us from life happening. And like the truth of it is that we all die, and it just seems insane that's the case, right? We spend our lives trying to not think about that fact and not think about the fact that every single person we love will die. It's both completely fucked up and deeply touching as well, just, oh, what luck. I get to be here for this moment in time, for this party, and I get to try and have as much fun as I can and experience as much love as I can. And sometimes the party sucks, and sometimes the party's the best thing ever. And then we all go home afterwards. So I think like when you're in grief phase, it's like you live in a place where the walls between you and the other side are so thin and so precarious, and it's painful as all get out, and yet it's really profound as well. Like you just feel so fucking alive during that. I was kind of giggling to myself as well because you're talking about, being authentic and grief and that kind of stuff. And I've just had 2 weeks holiday just to be with my kids, and to recenter myself in my life after a big growth phase and launch. And I think the last thing I shared on social media was, and this makes me laugh, was I was feeling really raw and really vulnerable. And I woke up and I felt like I could just feel all of my ancestors. And I feel like as we get older, it's just the more people who are dead. And that really sucks that they're not here anymore. Like, how come we're still at the party and they've already gone home? Like, I'd like to keep partying with them. And I feel like there's so many of them now who are dead that I'm fear that I'm going to forget them. And so I did a piece in my journal. Oh, I think I have it here. And it was like a little heart map of all the people I love who now live in a cemetery. Here we go.
Gosh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just really wanted to make sure I remembered all the ones who now live in a cemetery. And these are all the people that make up a part of my story. And sometimes I feel really close to them, and sometimes I'm still stunned that they're gone, Bless.
I love how it looks like this gorgeous garden that you can enter and just connect with them. Do you do anything like sort of visualizations with people who've passed on, or is there any ways that you've shared that gorgeous artwork that you do, and I remember from working with you, through many years, that you do meditations and visualizations for your community. Is that something that you've done personally to connect with people that you love? Because that's something I've been contemplating recently in terms of connecting, finding ways to connect. I'm not forcing it, but occasionally it comes up. Just I read somewhere that sort of taking part in hobbies that your loved ones used to do is a really lovely way to connect, and something that my father used to, when I was little, he kind of got out of it, but he used to have this kind of gem polishing kit, and for a while he was into like crystal polishing and things like that. And so even though he went through that phase, it's something that I remember, and crystals have been quite a strong part of my in my mind, not necessarily physically, but now when I'm thinking of crystals, it reminds me of those times, moments with my dad when he shared his little kit and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just wondering, have you had little moments like that where you
Yeah.
connected with people from your past in different ways? I'm sure there's
Yeah.
key ways to connect and bring them into your life, even though they're not physically at the party. You can still connect with them in different ways.
Yeah. I always feel like the relationship doesn't end when they
Mm-hmm.
die. Like it continues to grow and it continues to change. And sometimes like it can get healthier as well, because they're
Yeah,
reunited with their divine
absolutely.
source, the divine aspect of themselves. And you can actually heal some of the, issues in your relationship. Um, Yeah, for me, when it comes to connecting, I write letters and to them, and then they just also come visit me while I'm falling asleep. Kind of that liminal space. My husband's family has a tradition where if someone passes away and you're not able to go to the funeral, um, you go to the water, whether it's a river or the ocean, and you take a flower or something to give to the ocean as like a blessing for it. um, my cousin passed away a few months ago, very suddenly, and he was the same age as me, and we'd been best friends from growing up, and it was a real awful loss. Um, and I also come from a very dysfunctional family, so I knew I couldn't go back for the funeral or anything like that. Um, and so I made up a healing bundle for him. So I made herbs out of my garden and crystals and a little letter. And I went and put it in the ocean. And I told my children all about him. And those are the kinds of ways that I can begin to honor the ones I love who are in a different space now.
Hmm, that's so beautiful. And yeah, just it reconnects me with a ritual that I did with my mom and my sister and my niece. They just left a week ago. We had a whole month of just being with family and releasing different sorts. The latest one before my sister left is that we all went down to the seaside. And there's a circuit that my parents used to walk almost every day when he was still able to walk. Um, and we went down to the sea with his ashes, some of his ashes, because we took some of them to Indonesia to be buried in the place where my parents um, first met and where I was born and so on. So we had a burial of ashes there with all the Indonesian family around, and my brother and sister came from UK, were there, and so on. So that was part. We had a ceremony and cremation in Penang, which is where they lived for 22 years. That was the first one, and then this most recent one was just the women in the family, and we went down to the sea and brought some flowers and threw petals into the water, and it was just really simple and casual. And me and my mom we haven't gone every day. Well, actually, we've gotten into a ritual of evening walks because we're here in Malaysia and it's boiling hot, and there's even a heat wave from Malaysia, which is already boiling hot. So, yeah, morning walks are intense. Anyway, getting distracted. Yeah, so yeah, we've whenever we walk past the sea there now, we've got this kind of imprint of when we went and sprinkled those flowers, and that I mean, flowers are such beautiful um, things. I mean, they're plants, of course, but they're just. I mean, as you know, my business is very has flowers as a symbol, and so flower. But particularly when you're in grief, there's just something so loving and compassionate about flowers and connecting with that
Mm.
the soft petals and the fragrance and how uplifting they're just such um, yeah. I mean, I work with plants a lot in my work and all sorts of it. Just having that kind of real live, fresh
Mm.
flower in your hand and to be able to sprinkle the petals is there's something so sensual and so it just kind of brings you back to nature and kind of out of your head. I think that kind of connecting with nature and the sea and the elements is just such a beautiful way to bring you out of the kind of emotional suffering, I suppose, that can be triggered. And I hear you with the emotion. I mean, with the family dysfunction, that these kind of events can bring all of that into concentration, can't it? And all the things that have been brushed and like avoided and so on, you're suddenly brought face to face with, okay, there's these relationships, and that can feel incredibly uncomfortable at a time when you're already experiencing loss, with all the contradictions and, you know, various, you know, as you kind of touched on, like, you know, well, I don't know about you, but for me, when somebody dies, it's almost like all the, and maybe it depends on the person, of course, but certainly my most recent experience, like the negative aspects somehow, or the things, the grudges or like resentments or things, fortunately, or maybe not fortunately for me, I've had a almost long period of pre-grieving my father's death, because you know, also grieving the loss of him as a fully functioning, you know, person, because he couldn't talk or walk or anything like that for a couple of, well, almost, well, 3 years actually before he passed. But somehow, like, even the more slight resentments I might have still been clinging on to, somehow all just softened, and I really feel him in that more, that higher divine self, where he now is, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it brings up difficult emotions, because obviously not everybody will believe that, and there's, you know, some people have different relationships, and through the spectrum of our family, we also see the different ways you can perceive a person, which can feel so intense as well.
Yeah. And you're all looking at a diamond, right? But the diamond has so many facets. And you're also looking through your own glasses and your own healing experience. So for one person, it may make complete sense to be able to, you know, heal, forgive, soften. And then it may make complete sense for another person's soul to be like, no, I need to uphold this boundary that person hurt me, and I need to protect myself. There's no wrong way to it, you know, and you're just doing the best you can, and everyone's so raw, and there's no way you can fucking self-help your way out of grief, right? Like, you just can't cheer yourself up out of grief, because loss renders you into an animal.
Yes. Yeah. And it's such a roller coaster in a way, because you sort of can go to feeling fully functional and fine and like support everyone, to just crumbling at the slightest kind of word, or you know, you can feel like you want it to get so. Yeah, it's not that it's constantly raw, but and then sometimes it feels inappropriate to be feeling so. So why aren't I sad? Why aren't I grieving? And of course for me it's just still very, very new. And I do know from having lost my dog, which is probably to me one of the losses that I felt most in my life, because she was like my constant companion for 11 years. And yeah, that memory of that grief was the kind of the most powerful and potent for me. I mean, of course, I mean, with my dad, he's animals they're so pure in a way, aren't they? They're already sort of so connected to their divine selves that they're not really.
Yeah.
It's a bit more complex when it comes to human relationships, so it sometimes feels a bit wrong. It's like, oh well, I love my dog more than my dad. I don't love her more, but it's different, of course.
Well, it's easier, and like it's easier to forgive, right? Like, I had a dog called Charlie, and just as an absolute soulmate for me, and he was an absolute fucking ratbag as well, like when he'd get worked up, he would bite. Like, he was small, but he would bite. And then if it was storming, he would just stand there and piss in the middle of the floor, even like just infuriating, right? But you couldn't hold any of it against him, because he was just a dog. right? Like it's
Yeah.
in his nature. And then when it comes to humans, we're like, well, they could have changed. You know what I mean? Like we just don't accept that that's their true nature.
That's right.
But yeah, it's funnier and lighter with dogs.
Mhm. Yes. Um, yeah. So kind of coming back to yeah, your
I
business.
just
Oh,
I just
sorry.
realized I did not answer your question at
That's
all about
okay. And I'm
authenticity, and
totally
I don't
rambling.
give a fuck.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Um,
I
yes, but
wanted to
I
talk
would
about
also,
my funeral map.
yes, I'd love to hear about your funeral map. Tell
Yeah,
me.
well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Like when you said, "Oh, what about
Please.
authenticity?" I was like, "Well, what about my funeral map?
I
Let me
think
tell
that's
you
a
about that."
brilliant idea because, obviously, I think it's such a gift to your family and loved ones to actually have planned it all out and maybe even paid for it all before you die because it's such a stressful thing to kind of have to do
Mm,
and get all the details and that can also bring out the kind of infighting or the sort of misalignments within your family when one person likes a certain photograph or a certain color theme and the other
mm,
person doesn't and it's the last thing you need when
mm.
you die. So funeral planning in advance, I think, is amazing. Tell me more.
Oh, you know what? Like I just can't keep it super simple. I try and do whatever I can. Like it's like that whole Swedish death cleaning thing. You know, try and think of how am I going to be a good ancestor and, make sure that all my wills and all of my paperwork is totally up to date and that, I've got a 20-page document of every single financial account I have, where things are allocated, who it's allocated to. And that's on top of my wills and all that kind of stuff. So all my everything. And then I have it in a spot and I have two people, you know, nearest and dearest friends who know where that location is. They know the safe lock. They know everything. So and they know everyone who to contact in my family. Like they already have all of those details. So I just try and make it so that whenever it does happen, God willing, it is still decades more to come. That is just an easy system. So because I know so many people go through like the estate stuff and it can take years of digging. And I would just like to make it simple for people and whatever they need at the time, whatever works for them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's gorgeous. Is that something that you've thought about offering in your community? Because that sounds like a really beautiful
Well, that's a
thing
good
for
idea. I should, okay, I'll write myself a little note. And actually, I already have, it's in the Money Manifesting and Multiple Streams of Income course in
Okay,
the
I've got
Academy.
that. Yes, yes. Or
Uh,
yes,
no, where did I put it? Oh, I think I did some of it, but then I gave a full template of it in Get Organized in the Academy as well.
okay,
There's a
amazing.
financial planning, an estate planning section in there as well. Oh my God, look at me go. I was like, wow, that's a great idea. Wait, I think I
You
already
already
have
got
that.
it. Oh my God, you're such. Oh, I just. I'm amazed by your productivity, Leonie, because I also get the impression. I mean, I know for things that you shared that you only work what 2, 3 hours a day,
Yeah.
like that, and yet you're so prolific. I sometimes wonder if it's just a Scorpio kind of this focus thing that some people are blessed with because I'm a more mutable, very easily distracted type, and yeah, I aspire to have that, but I think also I'm a bit more of a slow burner. My moon's in Taurus, and so I just
Mm,
need to kind of just really do things in a very slow build, sustainable way,
mm,
and being a Pisces as well, I also need to have room for lots of emotional space and
mm.
stream time and so on. So I just maybe need to accept that I'm not on that level of productivity. Although part of me like secretly wants that. So I guess I'm working on that.
I guess like, the thing I always try and tell people is, there is a very long to-do list behind me of things that I haven't gotten done.
Right.
and they're just not going to get done.
Yeah.
It's just like a matter of like, okay, what is it I want to create? What is absolutely essential? What is absolutely urgent? And then the rest of it's just going to have to go fuck itself.
Yes, yeah. And I'm realizing as I just said that is it's maybe a case of comparisonitis again. And actually, I have achieved a lot, and I need to remember to celebrate all the multiple things that I have created
Mm.
and done and offered. And yeah, like, yeah, maybe like yourself, my to do or my desire, my wish list of things that I would love to create is just kind of, I just need infinite, well, I maybe do have infinite me's in other in other realms doing all the things that I sort of want to be doing in this one too. But I think that's
Well,
one of the curses and blessings of a creative mind is that there's, you
yeah,
never enough lifetimes almost to
yeah.
do it.
And to remember as well, like you have been doing like a very sacred and profound role, which is caretaking, and that takes an enormous amount of time and physical energy and emotional energy as well. So, like um, somebody said to me this morning, they said, I don't know if you know, but your energy is so different this year. Like it's very like energy expansion. Let's go. Woo, woo, woo. And it's true because like for a few years now, I've been a little bit more in just kind of maintenance mode, just like gently pedaling and looking at the countryside and, still doing stuff, just not in such a big, intense way. And I think it's perfectly fine. Like you're going to have a long creative and business career. And just like a tree is going to go into hibernation, it's going to lose its leaves, it's going to drop limbs. The same is true for us. Like the creative cycle is not to always be flourishing, and there's seasons for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good, an important reminder because, as you say, it's seasonal, isn't it? And
Mm.
just like we have the monthly cycles, we've got our yearly cycles, and then we've got our personal life cycles. And sometimes it feels like there's years where we're in a kind of winter phase or an autumn phase where everything's this kind of letting go or disintegration and distance, things like that. And then other times, and then you get little mini cycles within that too. Just
Mm.
yeah, that's what I love about nature and the stars and all these cycles because the cycles within cycles and just because you're in winter there's that phrase, I think, is it Camus or like one of the in the winter time. I'm not remembering it very well, but yeah, we in a similar way to grief, you're sometimes feeling really, the darker, shadowier side of it, and then suddenly out of nowhere there's like a happy memory or like a kind of inappropriately funny moment where you're sort of laughing and hilarious, and that's life, isn't it?
It really is, firstly, I want to tell you there's a book that I think you would really love at this season in your life. It's called Wintering by Catherine May, who's an English
Beautiful.
author. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Um, I think you'll just absolutely like it was such a solace book for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right about that real, like really funny experience where you are absolutely sodden with grief and then you still find things funny as well. When I was 14, my oldest brother died suddenly in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to a viewing of him, of his body at the
Mm-hmm.
funeral home with my family, and some cousins were there with us as well. And I remember walking down the street afterwards. We were going down to the Chinese restaurant because it was a small town. That's the fine dining that you get. And um, and me and my siblings were kind of cackling as we were walking along the road, and we'd just seen our dead brother, we'd just seen our first dead person,
Yes.
and he'd only died a few days before that. And it was fucked up and we were laughing. And I remember one of our cousins saying, I just don't get it. Like, how can somebody go from sad to cackling in such a short period of time? And I'm like, well, we're all going to be weeping again in 5 seconds. Like, it's okay to still find the hilarity in life and find a little bit of levity in this. whole
Yeah.
fucking thing, you know?
Yeah, and that's bringing me back to my more recent experience of my father being laid up in a funeral parlor here in Penang. And he, because we weren't sure when all of the siblings would be able to get there, he was actually laid up for um, several days, a lot longer than most people would be. And so me and mum, I was on the plane when he died, and actually just
Mm.
kind of briefly, like you mentioned, writing a letter. And in fact, I kind of had this feeling that that could happen or was happening. And was sleeping in my airplane sleep and just suddenly woke up and thought, I just need to write him a letter. And
Oh.
I can't, in my mind, I feel like it was as his body was transitioning, I
Mm.
just was writing and just feeling him, being really reassuring him and thanking him for like all the things I'd never thanked him for, and also just giving him permission to leave his body if he felt it was time, like, you know, not to hang on for us. And even though I was on my way, that, you know, it's okay for you to leave if it's your time. And he did. And by the time I landed in Singapore for my transfer, I got all these WhatsApp messages, or in fact, it was on the plane, so I was trying to fill in my landing card or something like this, that he'd passed. But so, you know, it was emotional, but yeah, I had this like really special moment, kind of in between, you know, in that time, and then the whole week before his actual cremation, he was in this in his coffin, and we're waiting my sister, and every day there would be friends of theirs that would come, and there was these deck chairs, and we made this kind of makeshift like living room, I suppose. Just like, it was a really gorgeous part of Penang, like up in the hills, and there's all these cemetery, I mean, graves all around, Chinese graves that are really beautifully decorated with little bits of incense and things. So it's really fascinating from a cultural perspective. And then also, there's 4 funeral parlors all open, and you know, you could walk past them and sort of peek in to see other people's setups and so on. And so it had like I think it was a my mom's Christian, so it was all Christian, decked up in white, and Christian stuff, decor things. And then our neighbor was a Buddhist, and then I think there was a couple of Buddhists, and so there was like Buddhist ceremonies going on next door at the same time. And so there was a beautiful kind of spiritual feel to the whole thing, but then also just like really it was also my birthday.
Oh my gosh.
His birthday, his funeral. So we were having like birthday cake, and then cremation, and like people coming and grieving and tears, and then, you know, being presented with cake and singing happy birthday. So it was like just some bizarre mixture of celebrating, and it kind of felt like he was at our parties, even though I mean, he physically was. I mean, his body was actually there, even though he wasn't, you know, leaping around with us. But yeah, it's such a sort of contradictory, wild time, isn't it?
Mm.
Going through that, and especially seeing. I mean, it's something that in my experience living in Scotland and with my family in the UK, I think in the past, people, or in Ireland and Scotland, there used to be bodies laid out, and people would sort of come and visit and
Mm.
pay their respects. But certainly in Mike's, I don't know, I haven't heard many, and usually people don't get to see the body at all, and don't want to. In
Mm.
fact, whereas in Indonesia, when my grandfather died when I was about 8 or 9, he was in our living room on our coffee table for several days. He'd been embalmed, but it just kind of, you know, just going about our kind of living, and it kind of helped make that transition just feel a bit, you know, you just kind of got used to them being
Mm.
around. And then
Mm.
it also reminds my uncle, he's from this part of Indonesia where funeral rituals are like the biggest event of a person's lifetime, and people can be embalmed and living in a home for up to a year before they're, and it sounds bizarre, but in their culture it's very and they'll bring them cigarettes, they'll bring them, you know, all their favorite things, in a bit like it the Mexican Day of the Dead, where people come on Halloween kind of time, or All Saints,
Mm.
to have a feast around their loved one's graveside. But in Toraja, this part of Indonesia where my uncle's from, um, who married my aunt, my mom's sister, they live for funerals, and they're more important than weddings. And people, if they can't afford to have a proper send off, they'll just have the body embalmed until they've saved enough money, and then people will bring offerings. To contribute, all the local villages come and contribute to the feast. So it's such a different way of looking at it. Whereas in
Mm,
UK, it's so hush hush, and it's
mm,
like kept to a minimum. And so yeah, that's it's been an interesting contrast being half Asian and half
mm,
European to kind of see that different attitude towards death. And something that I've always felt kind of drawn to you about, Leonie, is that you're very open about it. And yeah, I mean, what do you feel that that's just a sort of natural Scorpio thing, or is that yeah? Tell me a little bit more about why do you feel so open about a subject that's so difficult for so many?
mm. Firstly, I grew up with death. I grew up on a farm, and so there's death on a very regular basis there. It's the cycle of life, and you know that things have a lifespan. And then I also had, you know, a very large extended family around me, like living in the same small town. And so, of course, you are losing the elders out of your tribe, your literal tribe, um, from a very early age. And then my brother, my grandfather died first, and then my uncle was dying from emphysema for as long as I was, from the moment I was born. He was very obviously ill. And he died when I was about 10, and then my brother died a few years after that. And it's just been a constant cycle, you know what I mean? And I think because of having that larger uh, family of kin, that I got to experience that. Um, and as a person with autism as well, like, why wouldn't I talk about this thing that completely shapes us, can be something that's deeply powerful, is very human. I don't see the point in having taboo subjects. It doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yes.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
that.
And so I'd rather talk about it. And I think as a person who is a reader, I grew up with books, with my face in books, trying to understand the world through books. And I still read hundreds of books a year. That's when I feel most close to other people and like feel like I can most understand the world, is when people share about these fucking brutal things.
Yeah.
Um, and so I want to do the same. Like, I want to talk about all of this. I don't want to talk about just the shiny shit. Like, that's boring. If I wanted to just talk about the shiny shit all the time, then I would have stayed in my other career, which was, I was an Australian government public servant. I did think about going into politics, but really quickly realized that I don't have a thick enough skin. I really don't. Um, and I wouldn't be able to be all of myself. I want to be autistic and sensitive and creative, and I want to live a gentle and a peaceful life, and I want to create and share anything that's inside me. And if it helps others, and that's a miracle, and it's a thing of beauty.
Gorgeous. We're sort of coming up to the last 10 or so minutes of our time together. And just as you touched on feeling that you don't have so thick a skin, I'm amazed that for someone who feels that, and I know maybe it's the autism side of things that kind of gives you the kind of natural tendency to be able to just share without, not without caring, because I know you do care, but for someone who doesn't have a thick skin, um, to share those things can make you, well, I would imagine, can make you feel quite unsafe and open you to attack. So but you do it anyway. And so I wonder, how have you learned to protect yourself? Or can you share just a little bit about how you kind of strengthened your heart, or
Mm.
not necessarily to thicken your skin, but to continue to be a sensitive soul, when you're exposing yourself online, in the way
Mm,
that you do, and it's something that is inspiring to me, and of interest, because that sometimes is a block for me to share and shine, because there's a part of me that just doesn't want to open myself up to
mm.
attack, but then that keeps me from sharing my gift to the people who I know really need it. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts on that.
So firstly, I think recognizing like I know for certain that I have saved people's lives from sharing what I have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and is that more valuable than protecting myself from being called a moly bitch? Just somebody called me that Facebook comment years ago, and I was like, wow, so graphic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's obviously a very Australian thing, I think, because I've got moles. Like, wow, it's amazing. So I think the work is more important than whatever some sad sack on the internet could ever say. The work is more important than that. And I'm also very blessed because those people just don't actually come into my world very often. I'm really upfront about who I am and what I accept and what I don't accept. And if somebody's like a bit of a, like if someone's an asshole in a comment, they just get blocked. Like it's not, no, it's not how I would speak to other people or treat other people. And so it's just a no. And so we're very happy to fire clients as well, just be like, well, we actually just don't really want to work with you anymore. Like you don't, you just go somewhere else. Just
Yeah.
go somewhere else. Because I don't have to be for everyone. I did go through a stage years ago where I definitely came under a lot of attack from trolls and stuff like that. And it definitely did make me, it was something to heal from for sure. It did end up stopping though, like, and especially once I got kind of energetically clear myself, it stopped. But it did also, I think it was helpful because at that point, it helped me decide that I didn't want to share my children or my husband online anymore. And I think that's really good for privacy reasons and for there being, for them to be able to share their own story in whatever form that they want. So my youngest kid is barely on the internet. My eldest kid is for the first couple of years of her life. But bless her, oh my God, this is so funny. She's just started high school and just started doing a digital tech course. And the first thing that the digital tech person got them to do was to Google their own names. And she came home and she was like, Mom, Mom. And I was like, oh God. And she's like, I found my birth story on the internet, Mum. I found photos of where you're giving birth to me. And like they weren't explicit photos, but she was like, Mum. And she said that she's like, Mom, the other kids had nothing. They had nothing. And then the teacher asked me if I was an influencer. I don't want to be an influencer. And I just apologized and I said, I am so sorry. Like I tried to cleanse as much as I could off the internet. Obviously, there's stuff that still remains. I wish that I hadn't done that. I thought it was the right thing at the time when you're a baby. I wanted to share about that experience of being a new mum, and it was very exciting to me. But it's important that you get to share your own story. So, bless. So I'm authentic, but I'm also authentic in that, like, I don't tend to share necessarily when I'm going through a very difficult time mentally or whatever. I tend to share once I've gotten some support and some healing happening, and then I can kind of share once I'm in more of a resolved place. I'm not going to use the internet to be my therapist. That's really unhealthy. But I will use it to share my story afterwards in a very self-contained way, in terms of I'm not looking for anything from anybody else, and people can take it however the fuck they like. I don't need affirmation that I am a good and holy and worthy person, because I know I am. That's got to come from me first and foremost. Yeah, I've got to share from that place and not looking for anything else.
Yes. Leonie, I just love your boundaries, and yeah, to me, you're like my pocket spirit animal, because whenever I feel like that, I'm maybe struggling with that, like you just come to mind naturally as somebody who just it's like no, no, because I've been part of your communities for such a long time now, that you're, although I really did notice when you dropped off for a while there, and I'm glad that you did, because that also gives people permission to do the same, and it's nice to see somebody to do that and to own the cycles and the wintering of their own businesses and so on. It's so part of healthy business growth, I think,
Mm.
to give yourself that time off, and you really honor your family by really giving them the best of your time, and that's a real inspiration to all of us, whether or not you have children, whether
Mm.
it's your loved ones, or whatever your creativity, just all the things that we're alive for. We don't live to work. As much as I feel that, to me, my working life has become much more enjoyable and playful by having your inspiration in my world, for all these years. Because I think work can get quite serious sometimes, and I love
Yeah.
how playful you are with business, and that encourages me to do the same. So thank
Oh,
you, dear Leonie.
oh, my love. I love you.
Oh, thank you. I love you too. So we just got 5 minutes. Is there any last little things that you would love to share with whoever's listening, whoever's tuning in,
Mm.
whenever that may be?
Mm. I just want you to know, like, you don't have to create success that looks like anybody else's, and you don't have to create a business that looks like anybody else's. Like, in some ways, I'm a real oddity in what I do. I don't travel. Like, like, I have a joke. It's like a 30-kilometer radius. I even go on holidays like 30 k's away from my house. Um, and like, there's a major city that's like an hour from here. I've lived here for 5 years. I've gone once, and that was on a school excursion. Like, I'm not going anywhere, guys. I'm not doing shit. Um, so I'm not going to be traveling all over the world. I'm not going to be doing like, I'm not going to be leading masterminds. I'm not going to be like participating in masterminds. I'm not going to Necker Island. I'm not going to be networking. I'm not going to go wake up early and go to business events. I'm not going to leave the fucking house. I just, I'm not. It's just not. And I'm also like, there's a really long list of things I just don't do. So I don't do one-on-one coaching anymore. I don't really do a lot of live elements, because anything that fills my calendar gives me a lot of anxiety. And I know this now, I know this as a person with autism. It's just not what works for me. What works great for me, what I'm great at, is I am great at seeing things logically. I'm great at experimenting and seeing what works. I'm great at information gathering. Like, if I'm interested in a topic, I will buy 50 books on that subject. I will read them all, like, in a very short period of time, just like obsess, obsess, obsess. And then I can collate all of that experience and all the wisdom, try it out in my business, and then present it in a way that is really entertaining and simple for people to use in their own businesses or in their own lives and in their own creativity. And I'll create that once, and then I'll never really talk about it again, because I'm done. I've info dumped, and I don't want to say the same thing twice, and that's it. So that's just my gifts. I don't have to do it any other way. And I've, been able to create like $13 million a year doing it this way. And not 13 million a year, 13 million in total. Fuck, that'd be like one day, sure, why not? Let's give 13 million to go. Yes, let's go there. We're probably closer to 14 million in total now, but coming back to what really works for me, not having to do it like anybody else, not having to appear like anybody else, not having to appear totally professional or like I've got my shit together. And like, I remember, like, one of the most popular posts I ever shared on social media was the morning that I mistook my deodorant for my facial spray, and I sprayed my face with deodorant. I can still taste it in my mouth. Like now I think about it, was years ago. And it was like, you know, some people are born with it and some people just spray deodorant on their own face. Fuckers. Like anything that's going to make me laugh or me cry or me feel touched or me find useful, that's the shit I'll share. And some of it's going to resonate and some of it's not. And I don't give a fuck because I'm going to keep turning up and sharing anyway.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Leonie, for just being so authentically you and giving us all permission to do the same. And also thank you so much for just sharing your heart and being so tender and compassionate on some of the more challenging subjects, talking about death and grief. And again, just leading the way and showing us that it's okay to talk about these things, but also to have our boundaries about sharing in appropriate ways for us. So we don't have to share. You know, some of us maybe feel drawn to share. Like I said, I've got my Pluto is in the first house, and so I kind of like talking about these sort of more taboo subjects, but in a way that feels safe for everybody who's listening. And you know, like you say, just to be yourself, regardless. So thank you, Leonie. I just want to close by sharing this card that I pulled for our call, and it's the Empress card from the Wild Unknown. I just feel that you're such a ruler of your domain. You're such a creative goddess, and the Empress is such a wonderful card, I feel, to represent your gifts in the world. You know, you've got these beautiful boundaries and yet you're soft and tender and mothering at the same time. And so just wanted to share that with you and to anyone who's watching, just to hopefully feel inspired to carry some of these attributes into your own life as well.
Oh, I love that, Fiona. That is beautiful. And I just want to honor you, darling, for all that you are and your beautiful healing spirit. You're just such a nurturer, like right from the core of your being. And you've just done such an honor and a service to your family and to your parents and, you know, at a huge sacrifice. And you've done it. And it makes you wider and more expansive and to have a softer heart. You know, I think about my three elders, my grandmother, Marion, who passed away when she was 97, her sister Lucy, and our dear neighborhood friend Nan, who died at 102. And they were all such soft, kind, compassionate, joyful humans. And it was not because they hadn't gone through shit. It was because they'd gone through shit, you know, and they didn't let it make them jaded. It just, they let it make them softer and more loving and more open to hold all of this. I think of them like the polished rock. Like, you know, we start off in life as these rocks that have like these edges, like pointy bits. And as you get tumbled around in the river of life, you get smoothened and you get polished and so smooth and glossy. And it's almost like you can start seeing into the rock. And that's what's happening with you right now, right at this very moment. And that's what's happening to us on a daily basis. You're just going through the real rumble tumble.
Oh, I love that. Such a gorgeous analogy. And yeah, I love that you brought your ancestors in to sort of wave us off as we complete our call. And yeah, that behind your Empress, of course, is the Empresses that stand behind them, and so on into infinity. And so, yeah, may we all remember that we have the power of our ancestors and our passed on loved ones and all their very best attributes, even though we don't always see them when they're alive, but you know, they're very present, you know, through all those different facets of the diamond when we see it in its entirety, which we may not be able to when we're in our little human form. But yeah, we can always connect with that goddess within us and regain perspective in our life and our business. And yeah, I'm just feeling so grateful, Leonie. Thank you so much.
I love you.
Okay, enjoy your day, love.
You too. Big hugs, my friend.